I gave 10 years of my life to my mother. 10 years of sponge baths, hospital runs, sleepless nights, and silence so thick it became a second skin. While my brothers built families and careers in other states, I stayed. I watched her fade, inch by inch, day after day. And when she died, quietly, gently, with my hand in hers, they flew in like kings returning to a forgotten kingdom. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't thank me. They came for what they thought they were owed: her ashes, her jewelry, her house. But what they didn't know was that Mom had one final thing to say, and she didn't leave it in a safe or a lawyer's office. She left it in a book, hidden, quiet, like her. And when I read it out loud, everything changed. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. They always say time moves differently when you're waiting. For me, 10 years didn't feel like a decade. It felt like a hallway with no end, one dim lamp, the smell of disinfectant always lingering, and the sound of my mother's breathing through a baby monitor that replaced my alarm clock. My name's Daniel. I used to be a high school English teacher, the kind who always had a quote for everything and a soft spot for the kids nobody else noticed. But that version of me stopped existing the night my mother had her second stroke. It was sudden, aren't they always? One minute she was in the kitchen making tea, the next she was on the floor, one arm twisted underneath her. I got the call from her neighbor, Mrs. Kenner, who'd heard the crash. I don't remember driving there. I just remember the fluorescent lights of the ER, the beeping machines, and the way the doctor said the words long-term care like they were a formality. My brothers didn't show up until 3 days later. Eric, the oldest, flew in from DC with a pressed shirt and a Bluetooth in his ear, still closing deals between hospital visits. Michael came from Denver with his wife and their youngest daughter, Lily, who kept asking why Grandma couldn't talk. They hugged me, patted my back, and called me brave. And then they left. I left, too, but not the way they did. I left my apartment, my job, my life. I moved into Mom's house and became her full-time caretaker. No questions asked, no arguments made. Someone had to do it, and someone was always me. The first year was the worst. Everything was new: feeding tubes, medication schedules, sponge baths, insurance paperwork that might as well have been written in Latin. I watched the seasons change through the window above the sink. I watched friends disappear. I watched the person who raised me shrink into a shell, her words slow and clumsy when they came at all. I didn't do it for applause. But damn, I thought they'd call more. Michael texted on holidays. Eric sent checks on occasion. Money that helped? Yes, but always came with a note like, "Hope this makes things easier," as if throwing dollars at the situation could soften the weight on my back. I told myself they were doing their best. I told myself I didn't mind. But I did mind. I minded when I missed my best friend's wedding because Mom had a fever. I minded when I had to sell my car to pay for her new wheelchair. I minded when I saw my reflection one night and realized I had more gray hairs than I should have, more wrinkles, more weight in my eyes. And the worst part? I had no one to talk to about it. Mom couldn't hold a conversation anymore, and my brothers were always on a plane, or at a conference, or dealing with something on their end. Still, I stayed. Every morning, I made her oatmeal and added cinnamon, just how she used to make it for us when we were kids. I read to her, mostly old books she used to love: Harper Lee, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison. Some days she smiled. Some days she just stared. I learned to treasure the smiles. There were moments, though, when I'd lose it. Not in big dramatic ways. Just quietly. I'd walk into the garage, shut the door, and scream into a towel. Or I'd sit in the bathroom with the fan on and cry into my hands. Then wash my face and go back to feeding her like nothing happened. Caregiving doesn't come with intermissions. When hospice became part of our vocabulary, I didn't argue. I nodded. I scheduled the nurse. I thanked her for treating my mother like a person. We never said the word dying, not out loud. But we both knew what was coming. Mom passed away on a Tuesday morning in October. The sun had just started coming in through the blinds. I was holding her hand. I'd been reading aloud, To Kill a Mockingbird, her favorite, and I was right in the middle of a line about Atticus Finch when her breathing changed. It went shallow, then stopped. I didn't panic. I just sat there for a while, kept her hand in mine, said goodbye the way she would have wanted, softly, without drama. The nurse came an hour later, and we did what needed to be done. The house felt impossibly quiet that day. No oxygen machine, no caregivers coming and going. Just me, a sink full of dishes, and 10 years of memories pressing in from the walls. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Not then. That night, I went to her bookshelf. She had always loved books. The walls of her bedroom were lined with them, double stacked on the shelves, some spilling into boxes under the bed. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just trying to feel close to her. That's when I saw it. Her old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, leather-bound, worn at the corners from years of rereading. I pulled it down and opened it, and that's when the letter fell out. It wasn't long, just a single sheet, folded once. My name written in her careful, swooping handwriting on the front. I unfolded it with shaking hands and started to read. My Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And if I know you at all, you're sitting alone in this house, probably not sleeping, probably doing dishes, and definitely not asking anyone for help, because that's just who you are. I want to say thank you. Not just for being here these last 10 years, but for being the only one who never made me feel like a burden. You were my son, my nurse, my comfort, my home. I know your brothers will come around now. I know they'll want to divide things evenly, and maybe that's what they think is fair. But you and I know better. You gave up your life, so I wouldn't have to leave mine. I want you to keep the house. I want you to keep what little money I have left. You earned it. Not because I loved you more, but because you showed up. There's a will with this letter. It's not notarized. I ran out of time, and I'm sorry for that. But I hope this letter tells you everything they won't understand. I love you always. Mom. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, holding the paper, reading it over and over. It wasn't just words. It was her voice, her last word, her final truth. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt seen. The next day, Eric called. Said he and Michael would be flying in on Friday. Said they'd help go through Mom's things and make sure everything was handled properly. I said okay. I didn't mention the letter. I didn't need to. Let them come. Let them walk in like royalty. Let them talk about furniture and jewelry and splitting things fairly. I had something they didn't. I had her words. And soon, they'd hear them, too. They arrived late, as usual. Eric in a sleek black rental car that looked like it had never seen a grocery store parking lot, and Michael in a crumpled button-down, half-tucked, his tie loosened like he'd come straight from a PDA, a meeting, and forgot this wasn't a casual catch-up. Their wives trailed behind with polite smiles, eyes scanning the porch like they weren't sure whether to knock or just walk in. Neither of them asked how I was doing. I opened the door, nodded once, and stepped aside. "Hey, Danny," Eric said, pulling me into a stiff one-armed hug. He smelled like cologne and hotel air. "Man, this is hard. So sorry." "Yeah, it's a lot," Michael added, offering a half-hearted pat on the shoulder. "Glad you were here for her, though." "Seriously, thanks," I said, because that's what you're supposed to say when your brothers show up 3 days after your mother dies and pretend like the last decade didn't happen. They shuffled into the house like tourists, looking around, whispering to their wives, pointing at things. I watched them from the doorway of the kitchen as they circled the living room. The place had barely changed since they left home. Same beige couch, same dusty piano, same ceramic angel statue on the mantel that Mom used to call the ugliest gift she ever loved. "You kept the place up nice," Eric said, picking up a framed photo of the three of us as kids. Mom in the middle, arms around our shoulders. He smiled, not even looking at me. "Feels like time stood still in here." Time didn't stand still, I thought. I stood still, while you kept moving. Michael's wife, Jenna, made a beeline for the dining room and started counting chairs. "This'll be perfect for the kids when we fly in for Christmas," she said to Michael, as if I weren't 2 feet away. I almost laughed. Instead, I went back to the kitchen and started a pot of coffee. It took about half an hour before the real conversation began. We sat around the table like we were planning a family reunion instead of managing the aftermath of a life. Eric took out a leather portfolio, of course he did, and flipped it open like we were in a boardroom. "So," he began, "we should probably go through her things this weekend. Furniture, jewelry, whatever's left in the bank. Mike and I talked, and we think it makes sense to liquidate most of it and split it evenly 3 ways. I looked at him. You think that makes sense? Well, yeah, Michael jumped in. That's what she'd want, right? Keep things fair. Equal shares. Nobody fighting. She didn't leave a will, Eric added, flipping pages. At least not one we've found yet. So we'll just handle it the simple way. Split it. I stirred my coffee. There's a letter. Both of them looked up. Jenna and Eric's wife, Rebecca, I think her name is, suddenly got very quiet. Eric blinked. What kind of letter? A letter from Mom, I said. I found it in one of her books. With a signed document. Michael laughed awkwardly. What? Like a note? It's more than a note. I stood, walked to the living room, and came back with To Kill a Mockingbird. I placed it on the table like it was evidence. I didn't open it yet. I wanted to see their faces. She wrote it by hand. I continued. Maybe a month ago. Thanked me for staying. Said she wanted me to have the house. Whatever money's left. Everything, really. Eric sat back, folding his arms. That's not legal. No, it's not, Michael said, frowning. She was probably confused. She wasn't well. We all know that. She was lucid when she wrote it. I said. And she wasn't confused. She was clear. She said, you gave up your life so I wouldn't have to leave mine. Her words. Eric snorted. Come on, Danny. You're telling me Mom wanted to cut us out completely? Doesn't that seem convenient? I'm telling you what she wrote. What she felt. Rebecca looked at her husband, then back at me. I mean, you've been here a long time. It makes sense that she'd be grateful, but it's a family estate. There should be compromise. I opened the book, unfolded the letter, read it aloud. Every single word. No one interrupted. When I finished, I folded it again, slow and deliberate, and slid it back into the pages. The room stayed quiet for a beat too long. Michael cleared his throat. That still doesn't change the legal stuff. I'm not asking for legal permission, I said. I'm letting you know her decision. Eric shook his head. You're using this to justify taking everything. No, I said, voice low but steady. I'm honoring what she wanted. You think I did all this because I wanted a payout? He didn't answer. I cleaned her bedpans. I missed weddings, friends, a decade of my life. I held her hand when she forgot her name. You didn't call. You didn't come. And now you want to play executor. Michael's mouth opened, then closed again. Jenna touched his arm, murmured something I couldn't hear. Look, I said, you can contest it. Fight over some lamp or a dish set. But I'm not moving. I'm not selling. And I'm not dividing up her memory like a bank account. Eric stood abruptly. This is bull. The knock on the door cut him off. I opened it. Mrs. Kinner, the neighbor who had called me the night of the stroke, was standing there with a casserole dish. I brought the chicken bake your mom liked, she said, eyes softening when she looked past me and saw the gathering. She always told me you'd probably forget to eat once she was gone. I took the dish, thanked her. She lingered. She told me something else, too, about how proud she was of you. Said you were her piece at the end. Eric heard that. So did Michael. Anyway, Mrs. Kinner said, turning to leave. Y'all be kind to each other. She deserves that. The door clicked shut behind her. No one said anything for a long while. Just the sound of the coffee pot hissing. Eventually, Eric muttered, I'll be at the hotel, and walked out. Rebecca followed, barely looking at me. Michael stayed behind a moment longer, his face a tangle of regret and confusion. You really think she didn't love us? I sighed. She did. She just loved me enough to be honest. He nodded slowly, then left too. And I sat there alone. In the house I kept warm. At the table she used to sit at every morning. The letter still beside me. They came in like royalty. But she crowned me the keeper of her truth. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of stress, though there was plenty to go around, but because the house sounded different. Quieter. Lighter, even. Like it had been holding its breath for years and was finally exhaling. No machines humming. No hollow clatter of pill bottles. No shuffling feet or whispered encouragements from the hospice nurse. Just silence and the creak of old floorboards adjusting to the stillness. The letter sat on the kitchen table, folded neatly, like it hadn't just cracked open a family fault line. I didn't touch it for hours. I just sat nearby, nursing cold coffee, listening to the wind tap against the window like it had something to say. Part of me wanted to put the letter back in her book and never look at it again. Not because I doubted it, but because reading it felt like letting go, and I wasn't sure I was ready. But that's the thing about grief. It doesn't wait for readiness. It just arrives, quietly, rudely, like your brothers showing up late to the end of a decade-long vigil, expecting a slice of something they didn't cook. Eventually, I unfolded the letter again. The paper felt fragile, like it had aged faster than everything else in the room. Her handwriting hadn't changed much in the end, still curved, still elegant. But there were slight hesitations in the strokes, a wobble in the lines. It wasn't the pen shaking. It was her. You gave up your life so I wouldn't have to leave mine. I read that line over and over. It hit differently this time. The first time I'd read it, I'd felt vindicated. Now, alone with the truth in the silence, it hit more like a confession. Hers and mine. The truth was, I had given up my life. I just hadn't realized how completely until it was over. When you're in the middle of it, you don't notice what's slipping away. You're too busy managing oxygen levels and fighting insurance claims to mourn the loss of your own freedom. I folded the letter again and walked to her bedroom. It still smelled faintly of lavender lotion and mint tea. Her pillow was dented from where her head used to rest, and I didn't have the heart to fluff it back up. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened her nightstand drawer. Tucked between crossword puzzle books and a nearly empty bottle of sleeping pills was the second paper she'd mentioned, a will, handwritten, signed, dated. It wouldn't hold up in court. I knew that. But it wasn't about court. It was about clarity, about legacy, about her making a choice in the one place where no one could interrupt her. I want Daniel to have the house, the savings, the contents of the home. He was my caregiver, my strength, and my comfort. I make this decision out of love, not spite. My other sons are loved, but they were not here. This is not a punishment. This is recognition. I'd read legal wills before, distant, transactional, cold. This one felt like a journal entry, a final diary confession left for one person to find. For me, it brought me back to a moment 2 weeks before she passed. She was having a good day, alert, sitting up, even making jokes about my cooking. I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen while she sipped water from a straw, and out of nowhere she said, "You're the one who stayed." I paused, knife midair. "What do you mean?" She looked at me then, eyes clear. "You could have left." Like they did. "They didn't leave," I said quietly, unsure whether I believed it. She just smiled. "No, they just didn't come back." That night, after I tucked her in and turned off the lamp, she reached for my hand and whispered something I couldn't quite hear. I asked her to repeat it, but she just smiled again, her fingers soft around mine. Maybe that was the moment she made her decision. Or maybe it had been decided years earlier, when I came back from my apartment with one suitcase and never unpacked it. Back in the present, I placed the letter and will in a plastic sleeve and tucked them into the hollow of an old photo album. Not because I was hiding them, because I was protecting them. There were battles I might still have to fight, and I needed to make sure I had her words intact. The next morning, I called Ms. Lopez, her hospice nurse, and told her mom had left me something. She didn't ask what, just said, "Good." She needed to be heard. She came by later with a box of her own, extra medical supplies, unopened Ensure bottles, a few books my mother had asked her to return to the library. She handed me a small envelope, sealed with a sticker of a dove. "She asked me to give you this after she passed," she said, voice soft. "Told me not to forget." I didn't. I opened it after she left. It was a photo, me and Mom, taken maybe 2 years ago, on the back porch. She was laughing, head tilted back, and I was trying to balance a tray of lemonade like a clumsy waiter. On the back, in the same swooping handwriting, "You made me feel human again. That's all I ever wanted. Love you forever." I sat down on the porch step and let the wind hit my face. Not to cool me down, but to keep the tears from falling too fast. There was peace in the house now, but there was also an ache I didn't know how to name. A vacuum where purpose used to live. 10 years of being her everything. And now I had to figure out how to be something else. Something that didn't revolve around pill schedules and therapy appointments. I didn't know who I was without her, but I knew what she gave me. And that had to be enough for now. Later that evening, I got a text from Michael. Just one line. "Still trying to process all of this. Can we talk soon?" I didn't answer. Not yet. By Saturday afternoon, the house looked like a showroom. Eric had brought in a real estate agent. Yes, an actual agent, who walked through the living room snapping photos on her phone, complimenting the vintage crown molding like it wasn't coated in 10 years of stress and memories. Michael and Jenna were already separating kitchenware into piles: keep, donate, sell. Like we were hosting a garage sale instead of grieving. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them sift through our mother's life as if she were just a chapter that had ended, not a whole story. "Don't touch the hutch," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Jenna froze, holding one of Mom's porcelain teacups. "Sorry, I didn't think you'd want all of this stuff." "She loved that hutch," I replied. "Bought it with her first paycheck after the divorce. It stays." Michael looked up from a box of silverware. "Danny, come on. We're just trying to organize things. Nobody's throwing anything away." "No," I said, stepping fully into the room now. "You're trying to decide what you get. You're splitting things that aren't yours to split." Eric walked in behind me, sunglasses still on, holding a folder. "Okay, can we not do this today? I just got off a flight and we have, what, a weekend to sort all this? Let's be adults." I smiled at that. "Adults? Now you want to be adults." That's when Rebecca, Eric's wife, chimed in from the couch. "Maybe this isn't the time for guilt trips. Everyone's hurting. No one's hurting more than me," I said, louder than I meant to. "You think this is about stuff? I sat in this house for 10 years watching her fade day by day while you all sent birthday cards and checks. And now you want to divvy up her belongings like you were here every Sunday." Eric dropped his folder on the table. "Danny, you need to calm down. We all grieve differently." "Don't you dare," I snapped. "Don't you dare equate what you're doing to grief." The room fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the old wall clock Mom used to wind every Friday morning. I walked over to the dining table, where the book still sat. To Kill a Mockingbird. I opened it slowly, carefully, the way I had the first night, and pulled out the letter. "I asked you all here because there's something you need to hear. Something Mom wrote. Something she meant to be read, not negotiated." Michael shifted uneasily. "Danny, we've been over this." "No," I said, cutting him off. "You tried to dismiss it. You never actually listened." I unfolded the letter and began to read. This time, I didn't rush. I let every word hang in the air like incense. Her voice filled the space. Her gratitude, her sorrow, her quiet strength, her clarity. When I got to the part where she said, "I want Daniel to have the house, the savings, the contents of the home," I paused. Let them sit with it. "She was sick," Eric said flatly when I finished. "Probably confused." "She wasn't," I said. "This wasn't a delirium dream. She gave the nurse instructions. She hid this in her favorite book." Michael rubbed his temples. "There's no legal standing. It won't hold up. What are we supposed to do? Just walk away empty-handed?" I turned to him. "You already did. 10 years ago. That one hit." I saw it in his face. Jenna stood up. "Okay, but let's be honest. This house was going to be shared, wasn't it? That's the normal thing to do. You were just living here." "I wasn't living here," I said. "I was keeping her alive here. There's a difference." Eric scoffed. "Oh, so you're the martyr now?" "No," I replied. "I'm the witness." That stopped him. I took a breath. "You weren't here the night she couldn't breathe and I had to hold a straw to her lips for an hour. You weren't here when she forgot who I was and cried for her dead mother. You weren't here when the power went out and I had to heat water over a damn candle just to clean her. So no, I'm not a martyr. But I am the one she trusted. And if you don't like that, talk to her." "Oh wait, you can't." Rebecca stood, clearly uncomfortable. "Maybe we should come back another day." "No," I said. "You can leave. But this isn't getting postponed." Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Kinner, who must have been walking over with another one of her casseroles, knocked and walked in before anyone could stop her. She looked at the tension, the open boxes, the tears on Michael's face, and sighed. "You read them the letter?" she asked. I nodded. She turned to the others. "She told me about it months ago. Said she didn't think they'd understand, but she had to try." Eric blinked. "She told you." "She told everyone who came around," Mrs. Kenner said. "The mailman knew. The nurse knew. The pastor knew. Only ones who didn't know were the ones who didn't show up." The silence this time was different. Heavier. Embarrassed. Michael sat down slowly. "I didn't know. I didn't know she felt that way." I wanted to say, "You didn't ask." But I didn't. Instead, I sat with him, let him absorb it. Eric muttered something about calling a lawyer and walked out, Rebecca trailing behind. And just like that, the house belonged to me again. Michael stayed. Quiet. Still. "You really think she was proud of me?" he asked, voice shaking. "I know she was," I said. "But she needed you to show up. You didn't." He nodded, tears now spilling freely. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Me too," I said. And I meant it. But sorry wasn't going to change the locks. Or the truth. The house got quiet again after they left, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. It wasn't peaceful. It was sharp, charged, like the air right before a storm. The silence after the reading hadn't brought closure. It had cracked something wide open. I didn't hear from Eric again that night. Not a text, not a call. Just a black SUV pulling away from the curb like it couldn't leave fast enough. Michael stayed for a while, mostly in silence, nursing a beer in the backyard and staring into space like he was trying to remember the last time he truly showed up for anything that mattered. By Sunday morning, word had gotten out. Small towns have a way of spreading information faster than any group chat or Facebook feed. It wasn't even lunchtime before I got my first text from Pam at the grocery store. "Hey, just heard what happened. That letter, wow. Good for you." Then another from one of Mom's church friends. "She always said you were her angel. We knew she'd leave it to you." Then came the less friendly messages. "Didn't think you were the type to take it all without asking. I guess 10 years of free rent pays off eventually, huh?" Those stung more than I expected, especially because I knew exactly who they were coming from. People who hadn't stepped foot in our house in years, but suddenly had opinions. People who'd never seen my mother cry through a seizure, or watched me sit at her feet rubbing her legs through neuropathy while she whimpered apologies she couldn't explain. Still, their words had weight. Even lies carry momentum if enough people repeat them. I didn't respond to any of the messages. I just put my phone on silent and walked to the edge of the yard where the garden used to be. Mom had tried to grow tomatoes there every spring, even after her hands began to shake. I'd help her dig, water, stake the vines, even when we both knew she wouldn't be the one picking them by July. It was dead now, just a square of dirt and wilted memories. That afternoon, I ran into Eric's wife, Rebecca, at the pharmacy. She was standing in the greeting card aisle, flipping through sympathy cards like she couldn't decide whether she was grieving or just annoyed. She saw me and offered a tight-lipped smile. "Daniel." "Rebecca." "You know, Eric's upset," she said, skipping the small talk entirely. "He feels blindsided." I leaned on the cart. "He feels blindsided?" I spent 10 years watching her die. He flew in with a suitcase and a sales pitch. She crossed her arms. "He just thinks it should have been discussed. A family conversation." "It was," I said. "He just wasn't in the room." She shook her head. "People are talking. Let them." I left her there, card still in hand, expression sour like she'd just tasted the truth and didn't like the flavor. Back at home, Mrs. Kenner brought over banana bread and a copy of Southern Living. She sat at the kitchen table like she always did, folding her napkin carefully, like every visit was a ritual. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm used to silence," I said. "But this one feels louder." She nodded. "People are going to say what they say. But the ones who matter? They saw. They know." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to hold it close like armor. But it's hard when your name starts to taste bitter in other people's mouths. The following day, Michael called. Not to argue. Not even to apologize. "I talked to Eric," he said. "He's furious. He thinks you manipulated her." I sighed. "Of course he does. But I don't," he added quickly. I've been thinking a lot. You gave everything. I gave nothing." "You gave what you could," I said, though the words tasted false. He paused. "I don't want the house, Daniel. I don't want anything. But I do want Lily to know who her grandmother really was. Can I come by sometime? Just to show her the place? The garden?" That caught me off guard. Not because of what he asked, but because he asked at all. "Yeah," I said quietly. "You can come by." After I hung up, I sat in the living room for a long time, the letter on my lap again. I kept reading it, not because I didn't believe it, but because I needed to remember that she meant every word. That in the end, when everything else was stripped away, titles, bank accounts, family expectations, she chose me. Not because I was the best son, but because I was there. A few days later, I got a certified letter in the mail from Eric's attorney. A formal notice of potential estate dispute. Nothing concrete, just a threat. Just enough to remind me that some people don't let go without a fight, even when they've already lost. I didn't cry. I didn't call him. I put the letter in a drawer, made myself a sandwich, and sat on the porch. The wind was gentle. The leaves were starting to turn. Fall was always Mom's favorite season. She said it made her feel clean again, like the world was letting go of everything it didn't need. Maybe I could learn to do the same. I didn't change much at first. For weeks, the house looked almost the same. Same furniture, same clock ticking in the hallway, same floral wallpaper that Mom always meant to replace but never quite got around to. I guess I was scared that if I moved too fast, she'd vanish completely. Like her memory lived in the dust on her nightstand and the creak of the floorboard outside the laundry room. But little by little, things shifted. The first thing to go was the hospital bed in the living room. It took up half the space, its wheels rusted, its frame still carrying the indentation of her final days. When the delivery guys came to haul it away, I stood by the front door, arms crossed, feeling like I was letting go of something sacred and heavy all at once. After it was gone, the room looked larger, sadder, but free too. I didn't rush to fill the space. I let the light creep in through the bare windows and watched the shadows stretch across the empty rug at sunset. I didn't hear from Eric again. Not after the lawyer's letter. Not after I refused to respond. I knew he expected a war. Expected me to back down, or at least flinch. But I didn't. I wasn't that person anymore. Michael came by the following Saturday with Lily. She was wearing a red dress and carrying a photo of Mom in a silver frame. She wanted to show Grandma her picture, he said, half apologetic, half proud. We walked around the yard. I pointed to the spot where the garden used to be, told her stories, how Mom once planted 6 rows of carrots and forgot to label them, so we had no idea what was growing until she pulled out a half-baked root and said, "Well, that's not a tomato." Lily laughed, clutching the frame tighter. Michael watched quietly, his hands in his pockets. I could tell he was holding something back. When we got to the porch, he finally said, "She should have told me. Should have made it clear." I looked at him. "She tried. You just weren't listening." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know that now." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But when he left, he touched my shoulder and said, "Thanks. For everything." It wasn't redemption, but it was something. And maybe that was enough. A few weeks later, I painted the kitchen. Soft blue. Mom always talked about doing it, but never wanted to deal with the mess. I took my time, played old records while I worked. It felt like breathing again after years of holding my breath. The town slowly moved on. The whispers faded. The lawyer never followed up. Whatever fight Eric thought he had in him must have died the moment he realized Mom's letter had made its rounds, not just to me, but to her friends, her nurse, even Pastor Jim, who brought it up in a sermon one Sunday like it was scripture. She chose her son not by blood, but by presence, he'd said. And that is a holy thing. I'd never thought of myself as holy, but I had been present. Every damn day. Eventually, I rebuilt the garden, dug out the old roots, turned over the soil, planted tomatoes, lavender, a small lemon tree she never got to see bear fruit. I watered it every morning, sometimes talking to her like she was sitting on the porch, sipping tea, correcting my form. "You're overwatering that one," I imagined her saying. "Just like your father." I laughed out loud the first time that thought crossed my mind. God, I missed her voice. Missed her opinions. Missed her. But I also felt full. The kind of full that doesn't come from victory, but from truth. I hadn't won anything. I'd simply lived through it. Carried her across the finish line. And she saw me. In the end, she saw me. On the day I finally framed the letter, I placed it above the mantel where that ridiculous ceramic angel used to sit. The letter looked out over the living room now. Her final word, preserved and proud. One night, while I was washing dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. I didn't look like the man I used to be. My hair was thinner. My eyes were deeper. But I stood straighter. I'd built something here. Not just a life, but a memory. Not just a home, but a truth. And for once, I didn't feel like the son who stayed. I felt like the man she trusted. If you've ever sacrificed for someone you love, only to be questioned or forgotten when it mattered most, then you understand Daniel's story. Sometimes, the quietest sacrifices are the ones that speak loudest in the end. If this hit home for you, share your story in the comments and tell us, what legacy do you want to leave behind? Your voice deserves to be heard.